When we talk about the future of Canada, we can't escape the shadow of its giant neighbor, the United States. For better or worse, Canada's destiny is tied to America's trajectory. And right now, America is standing at a very fragile crossroads. Politically, the U.S. is divided like never before. Culture wars are tearing at its social fabric. Elections feel more like battles than democratic rituals, and trust in institutions is fraying. Economically, Washington has become far more transactional, wielding tariffs like blunt weapons, even against allies, to squeeze advantage. And strategically, its gaze is divided between the rise of China in the Indo-Pacific and the chaos of Russia in Europe. So what does this mean for Canada? Let's start with economics. Canada's trade is overwhelmingly tied to the U.S., and that dependency is both a lifeline and a liability. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, or autos may not come every year, but when they come, they hurt. Factories slow, jobs vanish, and investors hesitate. The 2026 review of the USMCA is looming, and it could be explosive. Will rules of origin for autos tighten? Will agricultural disputes erupt? One thing is certain: Canada needs to prepare for turbulence. Yet, inside that turbulence lies opportunity. The world is hungry for rare earth minerals, critical for everything from fighter jets to wind turbines to smartphones. Today, China dominates their supply, but Canada's north holds some of the richest deposits outside Beijing's grip. Nechalacho in the Northwest Territories was Canada's first rare earth mine, and its expansion toward the Tardif deposit could make Canada a cornerstone of the West's critical minerals supply chain. Imagine a future where Canadian minerals are not just an export, but a strategic lever in defense and green technology. And minerals aren't the only play. Think about data centers, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, quantum research. They all demand massive energy and cooling. Where better than Canada? Cold air, political stability, and some of the cleanest hydroelectric power on Earth. Quebec is already positioning itself as a hub with cheap hydro. Ontario is bracing for surging power demand from AI clusters. But the real game changer could be the Arctic itself. If Canada can extend fiber and transmission into the north, those icy lands could one day host the backbone of the global digital economy. But that's a big if, because infrastructure in the Arctic is still patchy at best. Now, let's pivot to climate and geopolitics. The Arctic is warming at 4 times the global average. The once mythical Northwest Passage is opening longer each year. For centuries, Canada has claimed these waters as internal. The U.S., however, insists it's an international strait. That disagreement has been a quiet irritant for decades, but as melting ice draws more ships northward, it risks becoming a real flashpoint. Picture the scenario: cargo ships from Asia trying to shave days off their journey by cutting through Canadian Arctic waters. Ottawa demands permits, environmental protections, and Inuit co-management. Washington says, no, you don't own this route. What happens next? Quiet diplomacy may no longer suffice. No longer, Canada will need icebreakers, ports, search and rescue stations, and satellites, not just to assert sovereignty, but to ensure safety and credibility. But sovereignty in the Arctic isn't challenged only by the U.S. Enter Russia. With its vast northern fleet, modernized bases, and growing reliance on the northern sea route, Moscow has made the Arctic a core part of its grand strategy. And while open war in the Arctic is unlikely because it would trigger NATO's full might, expect Russia to fight in the shadows. GPS jamming, submarine patrols, cyber intrusions, surveillance of seabed cables and pipelines. Think Nord Stream sabotage, but in Canadian waters. These are the gray zone tactics designed to undermine confidence and test resolve without crossing the threshold of open conflict. So, is NATO still a reliable shield? The answer is complicated. On the surface, NATO looks noisy, even shaky. The U.S. spying scandal in Denmark, for example, has reignited debates over trust. But beneath the surface, something surprising is happening: unity. Russia's invasion of Ukraine forced every NATO member to invest more. Defense budgets are climbing. By 2025, all members are at or above 2% of GDP, and the alliance is even eyeing a 5% investment target by 2035. The politics are messy, but the capabilities are growing. For Canada, NATO and NORAD are existential lifelines. Ottawa is investing billions in modernizing NORAD with new over-the-horizon radar systems, vital for spotting hypersonic missiles flying over the Arctic. These are invisible, expensive investments, but they are Canada's insurance policy in an increasingly dangerous neighborhood. Now, let's tackle the provocative question: could Canada ever merge with the United States? It's a fascinating thought experiment, but the reality, nearly impossible. Canada's constitution requires unanimous provincial approval to dissolve sovereignty, a political Mount Everest. The U.S. would have to approve annexation under its own constitution, which is just as implausible. And culturally, Canadians simply don't see themselves as Americans. They may rely on U.S. trade, they may share NORAD skies, but their identity is distinct. Integration? Yes. Merger? No. Instead, the real story is about Canada learning to play its cards strategically. It sits on the gateway to the Arctic. It has minerals the world craves. It has land and climate that can host the next era of data-driven economies. But those advantages are not automatic. They require investment, vision, and a willingness to act like more than just America's northern neighbor. So here's the question Canada faces. Will it seize the moment and step forward as a strategic equal, leveraging its geography, resources, and stability to shape the future of the Arctic and beyond? Or will it stay in the shadows, always reacting to America's chaos, Russia's probes, and NATO's quarrels, hoping the storm never reaches its doorstep? Because make no mistake, the storm is coming. And Canada's choices in the next decade will determine whether it stands tall in the new Arctic century or watches others write the rules around it.